Here we go. I don't know why I always walk over here slowly. Hey there, welcome to OnSet. I am Daniel. I always walk over slow. I really need a person to do that. Anyways, here with Cadence in New York. For the person who asked in the chat, we are going to talk about starting your first studio. Now, as it turns out, I don't know if this is a secret or not, but if it is, you know now. I started in the little secret behind the scenes Adorama thing. Gavin is doing a similar thing next week for like a home studio. So this is gonna be very specifically a portrait studio, maybe someone that wants to actually do this as a side business or possibly their full business. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about kind of gearing up what you might need, because obviously you could just have a bag of cameras and ideally some lights and go wherever to shoot. This is more like a studio. So what makes that different than just stuff? I will talk about lights, but this isn't like the buy your first light kit video, which we usually do near the end of the year. That's always fun to look at the new kind of stuff that's out and everything else. Anyways, hopefully you can hear me. Let me know how the audio sounds. If you have any thoughts or questions or suggestions, go ahead and put it in the comments. If you haven't already, please do like the video. Just like it ahead of time, you know, why not? Or at the very least, subscribe to the channel. I mean, you know, that's it. And if you set notifications like that person did, you will be informed whenever we go live. And as I mentioned, Gavin will go live next week. Also, if you don't know, well, there's a lot of news. There's another channel, Adorama Events. They do, to my experience, I've watched several of them now, not all of them. They're more like PowerPoint-y kind of style, long form events. So that's kind of cool. Might jump over there. That's a relatively new channel. In 5 or 6 years, you might be like, when they're huge, you'll be like, oh, I remember joining that channel when it was small. All these kids here now. But anyways, or just join in 5 years and then tell them you were there the whole time. Nobody's really gonna know. So I'm Daniel Norton, if I didn't already say that. We're gonna talk about starting your first studio. Again, this is gonna be more gear-based, so I will talk about the gear I'm using. I will try to give some suggestions of other stuff. If you guys have studios and you use something, feel free to suggest it. Ideally something that Adorama sells and not some other store, please. I wanna keep my position here. I talk more about the business and philosophy on my podcast. If you don't know that, I have a podcast. I haven't pushed a podcast in a while. I have a podcast, A Voice with Daniel Norton. Check that out as well. There you go. All the commercials are done. Let's do this. I'm going to use a camera, obviously, to take pictures as we go, because just me talking about gear is boring. Anybody really talking about gear, I think, is boring. But I'm using a Nikon Z6ii. I don't know if you, yeah, you can see it. It is on a tripod, which we will talk about, with a 24 to 120 lens. So that's basically my camera setup. This is what I normally use for most things. There's reasons to have other lenses and stuff, and again, that's another workshop. So let's talk about studio versus just shooting, right? Let's say that you're working and you have bought some lights. So for instance, this is my go-to light now, which is the Profoto B10. This is a 250 watt second battery powered light. If I was buying lights specifically for studio use only, maybe I'd buy these, maybe not. The reason why I say that is because you probably don't really want battery powered lights in the studio if you're only going to shoot in the studio, right? The advantage of battery powered lights is taking them on location, but there is also the advantage of no cords, right? And these do allow you to plug in and work at the same time. They kind of charge as you work. So they're not bad for that. They make a more powerful version, which I'll talk about as well. Or you can look at a good option would be Flashpoint. If you're at a lower price point, that would be the Adorama brand. They make a 300 watt, it's a little smaller. That is pretty good for a starter kit if you're looking for lights as well. But this is on a regular light stand. I probably should have checked to make sure the audio was good before I just rambled on all the time. Nobody has said, oh, somebody said they love Gavin. Well, they must have heard me then. Same subject. Oh, there he is. Gavin's here. All right. Yes, it's a much smaller scale. Gavin's going to talk about, by the way, speaking of small spaces, Gavin's distracted me. Thanks, Gavin. The event space in the New York City store it looks like it's just about done. I went there yesterday. I was gonna say yesterday, but literally it was like an hour ago to check it out, and maybe 2 hours ago. It's beautiful, so that's doing a great job with it. So hopefully if you are in the New York area or coming here within the next month or so, you should hopefully start to see events there. Start tagging Adorama all over the place and being like, hey, Adorama, events in the store, because the space looks beautiful. Seth did a great job with that. And we've determined the event space is a little bit smaller than Gavin's home studio. I think that's accurate. Let me know, Gavin, if you're there still. Okay, so this is kind of a standard light stand. If you were going on location or if you just bought lights or whatever, this is probably the light stand that you're going to start with. These are not the stands that I would recommend if you're buying stands for a studio per se. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is that they have a wide base, which is the main reason, really. And two is that they're not necessarily the most heavy-duty stands. We talk a lot about sandbags. It's always like a joke, oh, you're going to sandbag that? The thing is, the reason why you put sandbags on light stands is because so they don't fall over, right? A more lightweight light stand is more likely to fall over, especially with big things on it. So while this is a perfectly serviceable light stand, I don't know who makes this one, but it's, you know, standard kind of 10-foot light stand. For location work, this is not what I would go to in the studio. My go-to light stand in the studio, and if you're a filmmaker, you're probably thinking, you know, you put lights on those? Because, a joke, but they don't usually put lights on these, is the C-stand. These are not cheap, but they're incredibly sturdy. They take up much less space, and you can leave them set up because they take up, I don't know if you can see it from here. Let me switch to my other camera. Let me pause my talk to switch to my other camera. Oh, I actually did it properly. Look at that. Okay. You can see in the mess over here, the off-camera mess, that we've got multiple C-stands, and they are grouped together in a pretty small space. I mean, there's 7 there. I think if I counted that right. Yeah, 7. There's 7 C-stands in a pretty it's a pretty small packed space. You can leave them set up. You can pull them as you need them, set them back up. They're heavy. Even with a big box, you don't really need a sandbag unless you're going to start booming stuff out. It's pretty strong. Can you put one on? Is it safer? Yeah, of course it is. But, you know, for generally speaking, it's got enough weight that you're not going to need it. Do I want to carry 3 of these in a bag over my shoulder as I'm going to an office to make a portrait? Absolutely not. But for a studio, I'm looking at that camera, but the camera's on. See, I realized too long before you were looking at the side of me. I won't repeat myself because I think you heard me fine. But they're just too heavy to do that, right? You're not going to want to do that. C-stand has a few other, you can just get them like this, by the way. I always show it like that, but this is the C-stand in its beauty. There's different versions of them. There's a whole, Seth did a C-stand video on his channel. Check out Last Ex-Witness. But I think I may have done one as well, but go look at his. This is the stand itself. It's strong. It goes a little bit taller than your standard stand, but it's good. But most of them we get equipped with arms and grip heads or knuckles. So this is a knuckle, this is the arm. And this allows us to boom the light out. And even if you're not going to boom it a lot, sometimes it's useful to just get it out a little bit. Also, for the filmmaker people, which is why I said this, these are great for grip. They're great for putting stuff places. And we'll do that in a little bit, and I'll show you how we use those. But in a studio, you're going to want one of these for each of your lights, plus I would say 1 to 3 more. If you're just starting out, you can little by little pick them up. You don't have to go crazy, but I think C-stands are super important, and I would definitely use them. My plan was to, as I talked about each thing, to like show it with a picture, but the C-stand doesn't really lend itself to that, does it? So for right now, we'll just put the light on it. Okay, so again, it just goes over. By the way, this particular C-stand actually has, I'll bring it in close so you guys can see. This actually has a special kind of head on it. This isn't the standard one. This is called a magic finger, right? And these are really cool. Again, not required. A standard grip head looks like this, just so I can show you. So if you buy the C-stand off the shelf, it's going to look more like this. I have to appreciate that in our studio, none of these C-stands are like properly, like the different colors are mixed, the different heads are mixed, because that's what happens over time. So this is what you get normally. And as you notice, you're not going to be able to put a light on that, so you add an extra piece here. Again, Seth made a great C-stand video. Check that out. But I would recommend C-stands for all your lights and mostly everything else. And you'll see how much, if you watch this show regularly, you know, 2 Thursdays a month, then you will see me use C-stands almost exclusively. All right. Questions? Let me know. I'm going to walk over here and check, catch my breath a little bit. Matthew C-stands. I want to be Gavin Hoey when I grow up. Me too. Okay. Set C-stand video. Yes, amazing. Okay. Don't think I'm used to being a moderator. Huh? What's that? All right. Okay, fancy. Okay. Oh, Gavin's a moderator? Nice. I'm sure he's very fair. I would not be fair. I'd be like putting fake like things about myself, saying how good I was. This guy's, I actually don't know what you can do as a moderator. All right, so let's move forward. Oh, I should mention too, and we're going to use it in a second, C-stands come in really two, I mean, they come in several different heights, but really two that are the most common, the 40-inch and the 20-inch. These are the shorties. They're super useful for a lot of stuff, which we will use it in a minute. All right. Let's put this guy away. The other thing that I would say that's pretty, although specifically this product is designed to prove me wrong on some level, but I think it's very specifically a studio thing, is a V-flat. So let's talk about that, because every once in a while I'll say V-flat, and people go, what? Not B-flat, that's the range in which I sing. Actually, I don't know anything about that. I could be completely wrong. All right, so I try not to. B flat, that is. Yeah, see that? See how I did that? See how I came around? That was really good. Cadence star coming. All right. All right, so this is from V-flat world. So the idea with V-flat world was that you could have V-flats, which are, boy, I see V-flat a lot here, and be able to be portable with them. Compared to a regular V-flat, this is incredibly portable, no doubt. I see V-flats as much more of a studio thing, so I'm going to talk about it here. The ones we have over there, which are, homemade ones, don't fold down like this. They're a little taller, and I think roughly the same price. So I'm not sure you're saving anything making your own price-wise. What you do get with the ones you make yourself is they're a little bit taller, because these are, I mean, I'm incredibly tall. No, they're like 6.5 feet tall. A standard V-flat is like maybe like 8 foot. So they're a little shorter, but they're super useful. And what a V-flat's going to do for you is going to give you a couple things. Number one, you've got the white side, right, which is a great reflective surface. We can use this as a light source. You've probably seen me do that before. And we also have a black side, which is going to be good for either negative fill or just blocking light. If we want to control where the light falls, V-flats are great. Again, it's a thing you want in the studio. You're going to want V-flats in the studio because you want to build your situation. You have more control, right? You have more time. A studio is just a big empty box, so we control it by adding stuff. So we've got the V-flat. Oh, see, here's something I can actually use and show you. So for instance, if I want to take the V-flat, I'll show you how to use it as a light. Let's say I want a nice big kind of light that's kind of everywhere. I can take my V-flat and I can take my light, which happens to be on this small C-stand, which is totally fine. And the C-stand is not set up properly. I don't know who does this. So when you're using a C-stand, when you're standing behind it, you want all the big knobs on your right. That's really the trick. If you do that, then the thing will be much more or less likely to fall over when you boom the light out. So we can actually take this, and what I'll do is I'll try to show you. By the way, this is a Profoto. Did I say that? I think I did. I'm going to turn off the overhead lights. Boop. Oh, very dramatic, all right. And we're going to take this, and I'm going to put the modeling light on, and we're going to be able to see how I can create kind of a nice, big, open light with this. And I can open and close the V-flat to control the spread on some level even. So you can actually create, this is a great way to light a background nice and even. And if you're opening it up really wide and you're concerned that, it might fall over, which often happens, again, this is where a C-stand comes in. We can take our C-stand and use it to brace it. And now you're able to create like a wad. I didn't do it super tight because we're not going to leave it there for very long. And now we've got a large light source. It's kind of Again, these aren't super tall, so it's peeling past it, but you get the idea. And if you move it in closer or further, we can control the spread of light. So I'll take a couple shots and I'll show you how this works. Now this is definitely going to eat a lot of light because it's a big source, right? So let's talk cameras for a second. As always, we're going to establish our room, basically our black frame as I call it. And the reason for the black frame is we want to know that all the light in the space is being removed in a sense, right? So that all we see in our shot is the light we create. That way, when we're teaching photography, I mean, when we're doing portraits, we can, we know that if we see something odd, right, that we did it. If you don't do this and you're just shooting, you might be like, what is that light reflecting? And you spend, I mean, I'm not going to say I've done this in my life, but I've done this in my life. Where you spend 20 minutes trying to figure out how to get rid of some reflection, and it turns out that it was just a light that was on in the space. So this will allow you to really eliminate that situation, hopefully. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to set our camera at, say it with me in the chat, the lowest ISO within the normal range, in this case 100. We're going to set it at the fastest shutter speed that syncs normally, 200, 1/200th of a second. And then we're going to set our aperture basically so that none of the light in the space affects our shot, and we have the depth of field that we want. So in this room, it's usually somewhere in the vicinity of 5.6, 6.3, depending on how much light's coming through that one window that I don't have a shade on. I'm going to turn off the modeling light because I need to know the room. Oh, because I'm going to have the lights on later, let me do it with the lights on actually. Okay, so we want to establish it like this. What I'm going to do is I'm using a mirrorless camera, right? So I'm going to, I have a button here that I can press that basically gives me the actual visual of what the camera's seeing. I can see it's black at 6.3, so let's take a shot and see what that actually looks like. So this will obviously be nothing, hopefully. Okay, so we're looking at my camera, well, not my camera, at the results. Here, you can see my settings. You see the frame. If we come in here, I'm in capture 1, by the way, which we're going to talk about in a second. And we're going to move this up until we start to see detail on cadence about right there. We want to be about 2 stops at least underexposed. If we look over here, we're 2.25, so we are golden. This is a good exposure that removes all the light in the space. So I'm going to take a photo, or make a photo if you're that person that likes to say it like that. With the flash now, I'm going to use TTL, and we'll talk about all that in a second. So here we go, V flat, TTL, boom. Okay. So, oh wow, okay, interesting. You look a little bit on the warm side. And that's interesting, but we'll talk about that again. We'll also talk about that. Let's talk about many things. So, couple things. Number 1, let's stick with what we're talking about. Here's our V flat, right? Remember, with no flash, that's our shot. So by bouncing off this V flat, we have done the following. We have created a large, soft light source on this side of her face. It's wrapping around enough to actually fill itself, really, and it's lighting the background to a soft gray, right? And of course, the background in this case is white. Now, that's great. This, to me, is ideal for like big open swaths of area, lighting up a background, doing a fill light for a group, shooting children that are going to move around, right? This gives us a lot of options. V-flats are great for that, but my primary use for them is generally as fill. Secondly, let's talk software for a second. Now, we're going to talk 2 things, actually. I'll look at you for a second. To look at you for a second. I know you want to be cool. We all want to be cool. You know, we got our leather jackets and our boots with spangles on them and everything. And we don't want to use a tripod, right? Oh, it slows me down. Oh, it's terrible. You're in the studio. Invest in a good tripod. This is key. Having a good tripod, it should be you buy a good one, you'll buy 1, maybe 2 tripods your entire career. Invest in a good tripod. It will allow you to work faster and better with your subjects because you don't have to worry about the camera. Do you notice that I very rarely go anywhere near the camera, yet I was able to achieve a perfectly exposed, nice shot of Cadence easily as soon as I felt like it. I didn't have to go look for it, I didn't have to frame it up. I can repeat this exactly. Get a tripod, super important. The other thing you want to do, especially in the studio, and this is why I zoomed out so you can see my beautiful face, is you want to shoot tethered, okay? There's different ways to do it. There's more options for wireless tethering now. I don't use that, but if your camera does it, more power to you. Tethering is so important in the studio. I tether everywhere. And sometimes I say this and then people are like, oh, you don't really, but then if you look at my videos, you'll see I put my bag on the ground, I put my computer on top of it, and I will tether. I've done it in the subway, I've done it on the side of the road, I do it out of the back of my car. Being tethered is so powerful. You can see the actual images on a good computer screen. But even more so when you're in the studio, right? You're working with somebody, you're working in a professional photo studio, you don't want to be like, I mean, this is you now, and again, this is fine. You don't want to be like, snap, 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 look. Right? This is not what we want, right? We want to be professional. So, as I smash my stuff. So, we want, I'm the most professional. We want the camera on the tripod, the thing set up. We're able to interact with our subject. We're able to do stuff, right? We're able to shoot the pictures, turn around, look at them. And here I'm just using a laptop because this is my studio that I share, so we don't leave something set up. But if this is your studio, get yourself a nice monitor, not a TV. Spend the money for an inexpensive but decent monitor so you get good, clean color, tether, have it in a monitor, show your subjects what they're getting. Now, let's jump into software. This is Capture One. I highly recommend it. You can also use Lightroom. If you have specific camera software, you know, maybe your brand makes something, that's also fine. But some kind of software that allows you to do 2 things. See and edit the raw files and shoot from the computer. So this way we can do everything we need to do at our computer. That's going to be super useful for other things. Let me breathe for a second. That's my tripod evangelism that I have to do. Okay. Okay, we're talking about different brackets. Cool. All right, nothing that I need to chime in. Okay. Awesome that you guys are helping each other. I appreciate it. If you want to see the subway tethering, go ahead and check the video on Adorama TV that I maybe 2 years, well, it was before 2020, so well, it must have been 3 years ago. Yeah. So again, and you don't need to go crazy with the tripod. This is not a carbon fiber tripod. It is a standard Manfrotto 055. It's the same tripod. By the way, let me have a quick tripod side, because it's funny. I bought a new tripod, like this tripod, I don't know, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And the reason why I bought a new tripod was because I was doing videos and everybody would ask me, what tripod is that you have? And the tripod I had hadn't been made in like 10 or 15 years, but it was still working and I still have it. It was great, but everybody asked about what tripod. So I said, let me get a tripod so I can actually recommend a modern tripod. So Adorama gave me a good deal. And I got myself a nice Manfrotto. I really recommend this tripod. It's really nice. I don't have the head that comes with it standard. I have the ball head, the hydrostatic ball head, which I really like. The head costs more than the tripod, which is probably okay, you know. So little tripod side. All right, so we're in Capture One. This is not a Capture One lesson, but here's our advantage. Like I immediately looked and I was like, I can see cadence. Now there are numbers, obviously. We could do white balance cards. We've done that before. I think let me see if I have one in my bag. I don't have one in this bag, so I'm not going to dig for it. Basically, if I'm doing product photography or fashion or something like that where it's super important, I will do an exact white balance. Otherwise, I go by what I see. So And keep in mind that everything that you bounce the light off, put the light through, is going to affect the color of your image. So when I look at this and I think she looks a little warmer than she normally does, only a little bit, by the way, I might look at this and go, it's also a tiny bit out of focus. I might go, well, that looks a little bit warmer, but it's not really warmer, it's magenta or something. So I'm just gonna come in and do a tiny bit of tint control. And the beauty of Capture One or anything like this is I've now established, like, now I like the way this looks. Every image next that I shoot next will have that adjustment on it. So if we take another shot, like this, we'll frame it up, boom. And again, I'm in TTL, so even though she's slightly in a different spot, it's gonna give her the right exposure. And we can see the skin looks good. Boom, captured it. The exposure changed, not the exposure, but the power of the light changed slightly to compensate for her moving. We're good to go. So this is nice. Obviously it's super basic. V-flats are very, very useful, and we're going to use them as a fill later because I think that's more what I'd normally use them for. So let's kind of keep going forward as we go through gear. All right. I have so many computers here, I'm looking. It's like so many computers. All right. This is my light on my tiny little C-stand. So let's take a second here to talk about lights. The idea of using LEDs, right, or constant lights is fantastic, right? You can make a lot of great portraits of it. I'm actually planning to do a workshop just focused on that later in the year. But really, if you were asking me right now, right today, what is the best, right, thing for a photographer to buy that does portraits in the studio, I would still say flash. There is a definite advantages to using flash. It allows you to really, really control the situation better. So we're gonna mostly deal with flash today, although at the end we'll mix it up a little bit. So what I would recommend is if you don't have already 3 lights, you want 3 lights. 3 lights will give you the versatility to do just about anything. You could have more, but 3 is a good place to be. And one of them should be powerful. So I showed you my one light, which is a 250 watt second light. I think I'm still in the, yeah. I also have, well, I also have 2 500 watt second lights. And up here, in a space that you'll probably never see, I have my big power pack that's 2400 watt seconds. That's for a completely different other thing. But you want something a little more powerful because sometimes you're gonna wanna use big modifiers and you wanna be able to shoot faster. And more power gives you the ability, I'm hiding behind my camera. More power gives you the ability to shoot faster because at the same f-stop, you're putting out less power from the light, right? Less percentage. So get one more powerful light, like let's say a 500 and 250s, and you should be good. If you want to stay Profoto and you want to stay in the same thing, you might want to go with the Profoto B10, and then I think it's B10 Plus is the 500 watt second version. I actually have a B10 and then I have a X or B1X because I had it. And I'm not going to buy new lights just so they all match because that would be silly in my mind. I don't buy lights so they match. I buy lights so that they're efficient and they work for me. So we'll use a more powerful light as we go. Let's go, again, let me move this out of my way so you guys aren't. Okay, items. Oh, V-flat, wow, we're cranking. We are doing good. All right, so like I said, 3 lights. So let's talk about modifiers. So again, you may have some of this stuff already if you're starting, but if you are really just getting into portraits, maybe this is something for the future for you, let's talk some modifiers. I'm gonna say something that if you watch enough of these videos, you're gonna see that I don't actually, in this case, practice what I preach. I recommend going with slightly large sources if you're just starting your studio. The vast majority of people will be very happy with very big and soft light. That's what most portrait subjects want. Using smaller light to shape it and stuff like that, that's a very stylistic thing and something you could build up to, or if it's something that you do personally, then yes, embrace it. That's right. That's what I do. I use a lot of small sources. But if I was starting and I'm recommending, I would go with somewhat large light sources. So the first thing I would say, these are really, really popular. And I think, by the way, side note, there's a lot of side notes today. There's always a lot of side notes. I've now fallen in love with these Para-Snap. Yeah, Para-Snap, it's written in cursive. Can we read cursive anymore? Not me. These Para-Snap boxes are really cool. And if you're going to buy into a system, it's a good idea to stick with one in the beginning, because materials, and we've seen this before, it's the people who have watched other videos, materials will shift the color of your light. So, and this is not a bad thing, and it's not saying, oh, this is terrible. Anything you put the light through or bounce the light off is going to change it. So if I get all Parasnap lights, they'll all shift it the same way, and then I can make my correction. I'm good to go. If I get one Parasnap and then I get one Not Snap from a different company, now all of a sudden I might have two slightly different color lights, and I got to deal with that, and I don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to use all this one thing. And what's cool about these, let's see if I can do it again. That was really cool, right? Yeah. I like how they open. I'm easily impressed, apparently, or not. Pops open nice and easy. Double diffused. It's silver on the inside. This is an octagon, 3-foot octa. I actually made a video. I think I said something like my favorite light for portraits, and 3-foot octa was the light. I think in that video I'm using my Profoto one, which has since fallen apart. Okay, so, because I use it so much. We're going to use our C-stand. And we're going to set up a classic light a butterfly light, because I think this is a good standard portrait light, and I'm going to show you how we do it a couple of different ways. So here's our C-stand. First of all, I'm going to use my more powerful light, because actually I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use a 250. If you only have 3 lights, and this is actually funny, because it's probably not what you're thinking, or maybe it's exactly what you're thinking. If you only have 3 lights, you want your most powerful light almost always to light the background, because that's usually the biggest thing you're lighting, so it's going to be easier to do that. I was going to just use it to show you the powerful light, but we're going to use it in a minute. And I know I'm going to eventually light the background. By the way, this is the right way to put a light into a softbox. If you don't want to do it when it's on the stand already, I wish I do all the time, but these are new and they're kind of hard to snap, and I don't want to drop my light on the ground. So we do that. Up on the stand it goes. And in order to get it to go over, basically over top, right, to make a butterfly light for the clamshell, I'm going to use a sandbag, because I'm going to boom the light. Remember, we just talked about that. If we're booming the light, we're going to use a sandbag. So if you're living in a place like not New York, so you can't buy it at Adorama directly, you may have to order sandbags through the mail, which they will not come filled, obviously. If that is the case, buy play sand, like sand for a sandbox. Do not go out and scoop sand off the beach. And I'm not saying that because I'm an environmentalist. I'm saying it because that sand is full of all kinds of weird bacteria and stuff. Basically, play sand, they do whatever they do to it. They used to irradiate it. I don't know if they still do that, because that makes it sound bad, but basically they kill everything in it, so there's nothing in play sand that will mess with you. Thus, children can play, or adults, I guess, in the sand. Use play sand. Now, if you're on location, I should say, and you just want to fill them up temporarily, the other thing's fine. Just make sure you wash them. But if you're going to fill them up for your studio, make sure you don't. Another thing people will sometimes do is fill them with heavy things like pennies. We have one here filled with rocks, which I don't recommend either. I did not do it. So far, nobody's got any kind of weird rock disease, so we're okay. All right, so we're going to do the beginning of this first setup is going to do a butterfly light, which means we're going to center the light over our subject. I'll actually have you sit too. Why not? You don't mind sitting, right? No. We'll sit in the little red chair. Actually, hold on one second, because I need to put this up. I got to do a little Velcro on here. When you close these up, if you don't tear this off a little bit, if you don't pull this off a little bit in the front, then it gets all bunchy. So I find pulling it down a little bit works. Okay, there you go. So this is all good. So you got a little tiny chair. All right, so a chair is also useful. Everybody's going to ask me where I got that chair. I have no idea. It came with the studio. People have been shooting photos in the studio since the mid-'80s, when I was a young child. And I'm not even being funny. I was a young child in the mid-'80s. This is a Apple box, also useful. People always ask me, what is an Apple box for? So I'm going to demonstrate it for you right now. get ready. Notebook's out, everything's ready, ready to pause the video, whatever you're gonna do, here we go. This is what it's for. Now, you can also use it for this. Okay, and one more. This is impressive. And in this version, you can also do this. Okay, there you go, $1. Well worth the $90 or whatever an Apple Watch costs. Serious, you can do a lot of stuff with an Apple Watch. You can screw plates into it to put lights on it and stuff, but generally people get them to sit on. Plus people like to sit on that box. I have many, many portraits of people sitting on that Apple box, so probably some of Caden's. So, all right, so we've got the initial setup here. Because we're using such a large light source, we don't have to put it like right up in her face like we normally do with the small ones, like a beauty dish, right? We back it off a little bit. There's gonna be a lot of coverage here. But we still want the center of the light to be over her eye level, and we want to make sure that if we're looking at the light, can you see this? Yeah, that the light itself, I'm not sure if you can see that or not. Yeah, you kind of can. Okay, if you notice, the light itself, the top of the light, does not go past her. It's kind of like right at her head. And then it kind of slopes forward. We don't want it to be too flat because I want some control, but I don't want it too tilted because if it's too tilted, it'll be too shadowy. So you'll have to play around with it. The bigger the light is, the more tilt you can get away with. That's why this one's pretty tilted at this point. Okay. Cans of pop in your sandbag? I hope they don't blow up. Use it for gaining height. The funniest thing about Apple boxes is I often find myself doing this. You're like on the Apple box and you crouch down because like you just need a tiny bit. They do make different levels of Apple boxes, but in my experience, I don't know if it's still the same way that it used to be, all of them were the same price. So like your full Apple box like this one costs whatever it costs, $40. But the pancake, which is like this thick, is also $40. And you're like, really? But you know when you need it. Actually, they have a great set with it's like hollow. It's one full, and then all the other sizes fit inside of it. It's great. I need to break down and buy that at some point because super useful for location work, not necessarily what I would use in the studio. So I will not talk about that right now. I will remain focused. All right, I'm at 85, by the way. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit for this. I don't normally go so far out, but I feel like being far out today. Plus I want some room so I can show you guys. All right, so we're at about 100-ish millimeters. Again, I'm in TTL. It's the same light, so we're gonna see what kind of exposure it gives us. Now remember I made an adjustment to my white balance. So you could go back and turn off the thing, but I just take a picture and then I just adjust it again. So I'll show you. All right, so here we go. TTL, we made a picture. Okay. Okay, that looks pretty good. But remember, we made this adjustment here. So I'm gonna get rid of that. And then I'm gonna look. Now, this actually, I think, looks pretty decent. I remember before that the light itself felt a little cool compared to the other light we had, but I think this actually doesn't look too bad. We can see the background's a little on the cool side, but I think overall, this is pretty nice. If I wanted to warm it up, I could do that, but right now I'm at 5,000 Kelvin, which is where I normally keep my settings. We can see the light's actually very nice on her face with a single light, and you can see why a big octa is a good option for a portrait studio. Right, I want to crouch anyways. I always do. Crouching Daniel. Yes, put the sand in a Ziploc bag. Good idea. Aquarium sand. That probably is also good. Oh, comes in different sizes. Didn't even open their packaging. That is a brilliant idea. You win the prize for today. And it's probably different colors too, which would be very fun. I don't know if it's as cheap as play sand, but it seems like it would be also fairly inexpensive. All right. That looks wonderful. Now remember, I said, so we're going to build this up, right? Remember I talked about little C-stands? Obviously they're fine if you want to put your light down low, but another thing they're great for in C-stands in general is grip. So if we want to make this a clamshell light, that is, we want light above and below, and we want to do it with one light, let's say to start off, we're going to use a reflector. Now, one trick that I like to do is, number one, when you're in the studio, I got to get Seth in here to make more of these are so dirty, is instead of using like a portable reflector, like the fold-up ones you take on location, I use foam board, right? You always see me use them in here. We call them Brooklyn reflectors because Seth's from Brooklyn. You probably know that if you've ever seen him talk, because he says, I'm from Brooklyn. So white on one side, silver on the back, nice and easy, big, flat, disposable, although he wouldn't say so. But, you know, and I can hold it, right? And we often do that for a demo. But again, in a portrait studio, when you have a client there, you want to seem, I hate to use the word professional, but you want to seem more like sleek, right? We don't want to be holding the thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it on this C-stand arm. Now I could just like grip it on there, but what I often like to do, this other piece of gear that I totally recommend because I think it's super useful. This is a flag. So a flag or a cutter is made from a material called duvetine. Duvetine actually absorbs light. And with digital cameras especially, this is very nice because we can use it as a background. We can use it for a lot of things. We can use it for negative fill. We can block light, which is really what it's for, thus the term cutter. But what we're gonna do with it today is we're gonna use it like a little platform, and I'm gonna put my thing on top of it. So I'll show you how to do that. So we're basically gonna take our C-stand. And again, this is not heavy, so I don't need to worry about a sandbag, but you can certainly do it. And in fact, if I was setting it up ahead of time, and gonna have people stepping in and out, I 100% would put a sandbag on it. But for this particular section of the demo, I'm not going to. So if the sandbag police come, they will be unhappy with me. All right, so we have this nice and flat. I'll bring it in here, in front. And what we want to do is place it, and now of course they have shooting tables and stuff like that. If you want to set something up more permanently, a shooting table can be very nice. A lot of times people use drafting tables, you know, and they actually make photo shooting tables. I think they used to anyways. I never used one because I always feel like I can do this just as easily and I don't need somebody posing on it. All right, so now the light's gonna come, it's gonna bounce off this card and fill in the shadow. Let me turn this off. I love how dramatic it is all of a sudden. I'm gonna turn the modeling light. Let's see if we can actually see. I think you guys can see that. All right, so we can see how the light is hitting. I was gonna go touch it so you could see, but you can't see my hand. All right, we can see how the light itself is hitting the board. That's important, right? In order for the reflector to reflect, the light must hit it. It's going to, remember, the angle of incidence is the angle of reflectance. So if it goes down like this, it's gonna come back at the same angle, it's gonna fill under her chin. That's what we're looking for. Depending on the angle of your light, depending on the distance, you may have to tilt the reflector, but I think flat will probably be okay for this. I can raise it, and what I normally want to do here is, actually I'll show you a little trick that I do when I'm by myself. I mean, shooting by myself, obviously I'm not by myself. Cadence is here. At least I think she is, or I'm seeing things. All right, so I'm gonna use Capture One to look through the camera. There she is, looking good. All right, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here. I can see my laptop, obviously. I'm going to raise this. Of course, there's something, a clamp is blocking my laptop, but I can see it enough. I'm gonna raise it up. There we go, I see it there. Until I can't see it anymore. Because the idea here is that I want it to be as close as possible. There's literally a clamp in the way after I said that. No, okay, good, we're good. I want it to be as close as possible without being in the shot. I'm just gonna slide it in a little closer to her. Okay, now, and again, this is not perfect as far as being able to see what it looks like because of the way the camera operates here in Capture One, but it gives us a general idea. Okay, you're looking at a picture again. Okay, here we go. So this is here. I have it. I'm gonna go, since I liked my exposure last time, I'm actually going to hit manual. So now it's going to keep my exposure. That is the power for the light, I should say, not the exposure. And we're going to add our reflector because we don't want it to change our exposure. There we go. Filled in. Now, if that's too much, let's make another one. Good. Actually caught her half smiling. We want full smile as well. So now we can see, right, how clean we can get it if we want it to be that clean. And we can also go anywhere in the middle. I mean, I'm definitely more of a shadowy person, but if you like it filled in, I feel like that's too much for me. So I'm going to roll back. And there's a couple of things we can do. If we like the way it filled in under her eyes, but we don't like how much it's filled in under her chin, which is really how I feel right now, what I'm actually going to do is take the reflector and I'm just going to move it away from her. Because again, the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflectance. So if we move it away, the light that's under the board that was under her chin won't be as much under her chin anymore, and we still should get the same amount of exposure, roughly. And again, I'm not going to bother metering any of this. It doesn't need to be metered. We just want it to look, there we go. We just want it to look good. The important thing is that it looks right and good to us. Yeah, now our eyes look beautiful. There's still some shadow under her chin, so we can see, at least to me, that's a nicer variation. And the first one is maybe too shadowy, right? So we have this third variation, I think that's the strongest, where her face has a nice reflection, her nose is filled in, right? We can see the difference there, but it's not as extreme as this one, where I think it's too filled in. And it really depends on the person and their face and what you're going for and all that. Uh-oh. All right. How much does a sandbag weigh? That is a good question. Okay. Those Brooklyn reflectors are harder to make than Seth makes it seem. Oh yeah, no, it is true that Seth does a good job. Especially if you use tin foil or aluminum foil as it would be, to get them flat is not that easy. So there we go, skill set for Seth. Put that on your resume, flattened tin foil. I've seen people use like a credit card or something to smooth it down, but that's all. I just let him make them for me. If I've learned anything in my professional life, it is that I can't do everything. And sometimes it's not worth it for me to do everything, even if I can. So oftentimes it's better to just have somebody else do it. That doesn't help you with the Brooklyn reflectors unless you happen to be in New York and can convince Seth to make them for you, which good luck with that. But, you know, anyways, that's a side note. Okay, weirdly, we're going slower than normal. We're usually so fast. All right, I'm trying to be thorough. Okay, let's get to this and let's talk about other things we're gonna want and need, and we'll keep going. So, good, right? We can do that nice and simple, shorty C-stand, boards, reflectors. The other thing, I talked about Apple boxes. Now the final kind of thing I want to talk about, which is something I said you might not want to do at the beginning, is I think if I was starting a portrait studio these days, one thing I would definitely recommend, and I would not have recommended this like 4 or 5 years ago, definitely not, maybe even not even 2 years ago, is some kind of color changing LED. I had this rhodolite. It's the one I have. There's lots of different kinds. LEDs in general, like ones that produce, you know, natural light, like a daylight and tungsten vibe, those are fine, right, if you want to work with constant light sources. But what I'm recommending here is a color changing one, an RGBW. That can be any color. And the reason for that is this. I would say that gels are the cheap answer here. Gels allow us to change our background color, to add some jazz, to color things up. These are much more expensive, right? But something that you can do on the fly, fast, and is useful. So this light, if you've not seen it before, can basically be all different colors. I'm gonna bring it over the background. I'll quickly show you, and then I'll show you how I'd use it in a portrait. And we'll kind of wrap this up, creating something with a couple of lights in the LED, and yeah, we'll be good. All right, so I'm just going to bring it close to the background. Now, one thing you want to remember is, relatively speaking, any constant light really, but you know, these lights are not that strong. So we're not looking at the same kinds of exposures we are with the, I think I can, you know, let me keep this angle. I think this is a good way to do it. I might switch to the other camera, but I think this one's good. All right, I don't know if the other one, no, because the other one's being blocked by the reflector. Okay, so you can see it back there. Sometimes they can be controlled by remotes. I think this one can too, but I don't have it set up, so I will walk up to it. The old-fashioned remote. All right, so I'm gonna turn it on, and you can see that, I think you can see. Yeah, you can see that, right? Yeah, oh yeah, on super bright. Okay, we can see that this is, in fact, daylight balance right now. I'm gonna turn it down to 50%. For the demo here, just to kind of show you this, I'm gonna turn it down a bit so it's more obvious. When we go to shoot, we're gonna need to give it more power, I'm sure. Yeah, that looks better, okay. I don't want it to be overexposed. So what we can do here is we can go on this guy and we can hit, there's like a gels function, right? So here we go, here's red, we got purple, we got blue. So we can get somebody here and say, oh, you've got green eyes. What's your favorite color? Give me a color in the chat that's, please, a normal one. Actually, I'll just pick one. All right, we're gonna go yellow. People always say like green or something. Green always looks terrible. All right, we'll go with purple. All right, because it's intense. So we have this purple light, and now I can literally make the background purple, right? I'm changing the background to purple, and because the light is purple, any exposure I make is going to be purple. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to do this. I'm gonna turn the flash off for a second. So that way we're not using any flash, and I'm gonna basically look through my camera. Oh, I'll show you. I think I can probably show you how to do this. The simplest way to do this, I'm gonna look through the camera. This is gonna look crazy at first. All right, because again, the camera's trying to give us an exposure. I'm gonna press this button on the camera, and now I'm only seeing the actual exposure. See how dark that is? So what we're gonna do here is, I'm gonna adjust my shutter speed, basically. I'm at a 200th of a second. I'm sorry, I messed with my aperture there. I'm at a 200th of a second. I'm gonna dial my shutter speed down until I start to get some color back there. Let's say 60th of a second is still pretty good. Most people will be pretty frozen at a 60th of a second. And if I take a picture, we're gonna get, not that obviously, we're gonna get a nice lavendery purple background, right? See how that works? And I can, if I do that and then like, oh no, I like blue, I can literally just make it blue. Like it's that simple. And again, if you have a remote, right, I'll walk over here, I'll make it blue. Here's blue. Now different colors are gonna be different brightnesses, so you might have to make some slight adjustments. But in general, you know, blue. And again, I could keep doing it, but I have to keep walking back there, and I'm way too old to keep walking back and forth. So you get the idea. What about our GBW lightsabers? Okay, so let's have a quick sidebar about that. I think if I'm understanding this question about fitting into normal lights, if you buy something that's not made for photography, you may run into problems. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying that if you spend $90 or $75 or whatever they cost, $12 now, they're cheaper than they used to be, you may end up with weird flickering or weird color bands. So do some testing before you get an actual client in front of you. Stuff that's made for photography is going to be clean. So that's why we buy the stuff that's made for photography. I normally at the end of the year do some, or I think I just do a DIY. I don't know. At some point during the year, I usually do a DIY day, and I buy a bunch of stuff at a hardware store. This year I might try to do the RGBW bulbs because they're getting cheaper to kind of see what we can do with them. But you always have to know that you might get really weird results that aren't going to be very good. So worth testing. I wouldn't bank on it. Okay, so one thing we're going to know here is this. The background is a little bit dark. In order to keep that saturation, we have to keep the light off the background, right? And the problem with that is this. Watch, I will take a picture now with the flash. Those who have been around before know exactly what's going to happen. And while the background is bluish, we definitely have lost a lot of the saturation. I'll do a purple one too, just so you can see, because blue sometimes people just think, well, that's just the, you know, because things fall off. Plus I felt like walking again, get a little exercise, get myself out there. Getting my steps in as it would be. Okay. There's a purple one, there we go. So if you're okay with a little tinge, that's fine. But if we want the background to be as saturated as possible, we need to keep our strobe off the background. So again, in a studio where you're controlling the light and you want total maximum control, one thing you might want to invest in almost certainly is a grid for your light. So let's talk about grids for a second. I intentionally didn't go there because I think sometimes we just throw them on there and then it's kind of like, oh yeah, a grid, but let's show what this thing can really do. If I can find the grids. I'm pretty sure I have a grid for this light. This will be the time I don't have a grid. Do I not have a grid for this one? Oh boy, okay. I may not have a grid for this one, guys. We'll do a quick switch. I know I have a grid for the 40-40, so let's do this. Let's do a quick little switcheroo here. This is a 40-inch square. It's gonna be roughly the same. I like the octagon slightly better. I like the shape of it. I like the movie by Chuck Norris. One of the better ones, I think. Some people, say Lone Wolf McQuade. I'm much more on the octagon. All right. So I'm gonna cut, because I don't want to move this into the spot I like. So I'm gonna, Kane's just smart enough to get up. No, I'm gonna take the whole thing down. Thank you though. I'm gonna take this off, because again, I want to put the softbox. I would do it up in the air if I was more comfortable with doing that, but these are so new. They require a little bit of manhandling to close these little clamps. Profoto uses this funky clamp, and these are a little tight, because they're new. By the way, these Parasnap, I don't know if I mentioned this, but these are basically, you can switch out the different rings in the back to be various lighting. It actually comes with a Bowens mount, or kind of the standard Godox-ish. Everybody still calls it Bowens mount because that's where it started, but I don't even know if Bowens is around anymore. Okay. That's roughly the same size, so we should get roughly the same light. I will do a quick check. All right, I'm gonna add this egg crate. What's funny is when we're done here, I'm sure I will find the other one. I know I have it. All right. I'm 90% sure I have it anyways. Okay, egg crate or grid. This is designed to control the spread of the light. And I'm always sure to emphasize that because you will see people say, even to this day, a very inaccurate statement, which is it focuses the light. It does not focus the light. Grids do not focus the light. They narrow the spread. Focusing increases the intensity in the center. This just narrows the spread. It does feather it a bit, but it does not focus the light. If anything, it cuts the light. If you focus the light, it makes it brighter, at least in the center. All right. I'm going to do this up in the air just to make life easy, or more difficult, depending on how you want to think about it. I'm pretty sure. I'm curious now where the other grid is, and I could go looking for it, but I think at this point, if Seth was here, I would look for it, mostly because it would aggravate him if I did. He'd be like off camera yelling at me, going, "Dead air, dead air." All right. I don't know what I would do without him. Well, we see what I'm doing without him. All right. Okay, so again, this is a 40-inch square. It's a little bit smaller, but it's roughly the same size. We're gonna do a quick test shot. Again, I'm in manual, so my exposure is likely not gonna be 100% correct because I've changed modifiers. But that's why I'm looking. Oh yeah, I need a lot of light. Okay, wow. Oh, because I have the grid on there. But look at how intense the background is. Okay, I added the grid. A grid's gonna, well, we can actually look at it. So, since I've already done this, you can't see it because I forgot to switch. I will give a second to switch so you can all look at it and see how dark it is. All right. So, when we want to add a grid and we don't want to switch back to TTL for whatever reason, what we can do is we can look at our shot and we can go, okay, this is dark. Where do we want it to be? And we can go over to our adjustments and we can grab our exposure slider. Now, remember, we're only going to adjust the front light, so I'm not concerned about what the background looks like in this case. I'm just looking at her skin tone. I'm going to raise this up until her skin tone gets where I want it, which would be there, and that is 1.38. So I'm going to go back to 0 again. I'm going to go to my A light. I'm going to raise the power of it, 1.4. We'll do 1.5 to be safe. And now, in theory, we should have corrected ourselves. Everything's in theory until it's in practice. There we go. Now, we've basically got the light good on her. The background is slightly better than it was when we had the thing. It's still getting a little bit on there, so we're going to make some adjustments. But at least now we have a good exposure on her. Let me do an exposure without the flash again. Oh yeah, should be. Okay, so that's without the flash. That would be an ideal. That's what we're going for. Again, it's going to be tricky in such a small space, but we're going to make it happen. And I'm going to use all the things that some of the things we talked about today. All right, here we go. Number one, I'm going to use the inverse square law, which we have not talked about, but I'm going to lower the light a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to move it slightly closer. That's going to help us a tiny bit, but not enough. The main things we're going to use here are the V-flats. Remember those V-flats? Dun, 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 dun. Now this is the kind of thing, see if I just done this right out of the gate, well it would have worked, but it wouldn't have been as exciting. So I'm going to get the second V-flat. One of these V-flats has sound panels on it because Seth uses it to make sound recordings. And I always go to grab it. I'm like, what's wrong with that V-flat? And then yeah, that's what's wrong with it. You can't see me, can you? Because I'm on the wrong thing. Hold on 1 second. They're looking at a dark image going, what is happening here? Somebody's just joining this now going, what is going on here, Daniel? Oh, the other thing that I did too, somewhat incorrectly, is I left the overhead lights on, but we'll deal with that in a second. I assume that most people at home are not doing their portrait sessions while recording a live stream. So some of the things that happen here might not happen to you. But if you are recording it, you know, hey, let me know, because that's maybe that's the new way of doing things. Live stream style. Okay. I'm doing this a little bit backwards because of the space I have. Actually, I'll do it. I guess I'll do it correctly. Let's do it correctly. Anything worth doing is worth doing wrong. Or right, or whatever the statement is. All right, we're going to move these in. The goal here is to stop the light from coming forward. So I'm just, actually I can just do it like this. All we really want is a wall here. It doesn't matter which way the V-flat's facing because no light's really bouncing around that way. The only downside here is I'm adding a little bit of negative fill, but that's okay. It's not going to make that big of a difference to her, and we want a little drama anyways. One important lesson to learn in life and photography is that sometimes you just got to go with it, you know. Not everything's going to work out exactly the way you planned. All right, so a couple things. Number one, I'm going to turn off the, excuse me. This is where if I download that remote app, I'd be much better off. I'm going to turn off this light in the back. Number two, I'm going to, because I don't want to see it right now, I'm going to turn the camera back to 200th of a second, because we know that gets rid of this light, overhead light. And I'm going to make a shot. I want to see how much light's hitting the background. Okay, not too bad. That's pretty good. I can live with that. We could, I mean, you know, you could really finesse it. I did a shot with Joe here, Joe McNally, and we like built, we had like cards above the person, behind the person. I mean, you can get that deep into it. I actually like that gradation. I think it's pretty good. What I might do is just move the light slightly lower again, because that will help. Let's see what that looks like. You can't see, so I will come back and show you. Yep, see how we're not getting a black background, but it's getting darker. Now, people that normally watch and I usually get the black background immediately with this, with a beauty dish or whatever, you can see the difference here, right? Now, the other thing we're gonna do, which will make a difference, so let me add it in there. We're gonna bring back our reflector. I was thinking about using a second light, but I don't think we need it. So I liked our reflector before. Let's bring it back in. And there's something this reflector will do, which is very interesting. Right now, a lot of our light is bleeding forward, and it's bleeding forward and hitting the white ground and then bouncing up and going behind her. So hopefully by adding this back in, I know you're looking at a picture of Cadence, but I figure that's probably fine. I will flip back to me for a second right before I take a picture. So before you were looking at a very dark picture, that that's why I was like, that's not very good. All right, so we'll bring this in. Again, you could put a sandbag on this. I'm not really that worried about it in this situation, but if you are worried, you could do that. The sandbag police will not bother you if you don't, but all right, here we go. This is with no reflector. Just want to see. Okay, cool. And now we're going to add the reflector in. And this should give us a nice shot. Okay, here we go. Make sure it's not too close. Good, that's where we like it. Okay, so we have a dark gray background. We've got cadence, everything looks good. And now again, we can come in here and go, hey, what's your favorite color? Or if you, see if I can remember how to do this. I'm gonna do something really, hopefully dramatic and cool, but possibly not. Don't worry, I'm still here, people. They're probably like, where are you? Oh, this doesn't have that mode. Okay, or maybe it does. No, it does not. Okay. I will not do that dramatic and cool thing, so don't worry about it. Luckily, I did not say what it was. All right, we're gonna go here. We're gonna start with purple again. I'm gonna come back and turn off the overhead lights. We're gonna go back down to a 60th of a second. And let's see what we get. There we go. Yeah, you can see it right now. Okay, yeah, I thought so. It's a tiny bit soft. I'm just gonna turn on this modeling light for a second so I can get a good focus. Off, boom. Okay, there we go. There we go, sharp. Now we have this nice purpley lavender background, fairly even, you know, as far as compared to the gray, right? Like here was our gray. And we have a nice color here that can bring out this. We have a nice fill, and I'm only using 2 lights right now. Obviously, you could do this with a gel, but again, the advantage of this is how quickly, especially if I had the remote, I can sit there with my phone and do this, or I can go like this and go, all right, red background. So if we wanted it to be fiery, you know, boom, now we have this red going on, right? And again, we've got, it drops down to a grayish. I think the purple actually is nicer for this case, but we can adjust its position. We can do anything we want with it. Actually, oh, did I turn it down? I did turn it down, right? Yeah, I turned it down for the, okay, hold on a second. Bum, ba, da, bum, bum. Thought I had turned it down. This is a fairly bright light. All right, so I'm gonna go like this. I'm turning the power back up, guys. I'm gonna have to make a quick adjustment. The reason why I'm turning the power up is because I can try to get more spread. I backed it up a little bit. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Now we have a nice red background. And again, we could do over, if I had multiple lights, I could do over and over again. There's all kinds of stuff we can do here, and we can do it really, really quickly. And of course, it can be subtle. I guess we have green eyes, so we should do a green one. I doubt I have exactly that color, but. That green is definitely not correct, but we'll go with it. Your eyes are not lime colored, but. lime green eyes. Well, you know, we can. Funny enough, a lot of these softwares, I don't know if this one does for this particular light, but some of them allow you to take a picture, jump in here, click on part of the picture, and then actually adjust the light to that color. So the technology for these is just fantastic, you know. And I think that as a modern portrait photographer, having the technology, using the technology, doing the things that we have to move forward is super important. So in summary, for a studio, we want to work with items that are a little bit more robust, heavier, right, for safety reasons, bigger, and sometimes those things can actually be less expensive, right? A big fold-up reflector that was 4 foot by 8 foot would cost you several $100s for one of them, where we can get a V-flat, which is effectively 2 of them, for, you know, that price, effectively. So we can have these things. We can use our Brooklyn reflectors, and of course you can use your regular softboxes and stuff. So any questions? I'll check quickly. I know we're running a little behind. All right, Daniel, have you AF assist functions? I do have the AF assist shut down because I find it makes people blink. Yeah, black flag, the glow behind the model, that does help. Yep. Yep, all that's cool. I'm saying yep because I'm just looking. Cool. All right. I will leave the green background because I feel all funky here. Funky green. And next week, it's a little earlier in the day. I have forgot to say that before, so I make sure to say it. Gavin goes live. Well, it's earlier for us. It's the same for him, I think. I think it's at 2 o'clock. I wish I had written that down, but check the Adorama schedule. Gavin will be here next Thursday. Block the whole day Thursday. He's worth it. He's going to talk about home studios, so working in a smaller space. That'll be really interesting and fun to watch. So jump in on that. The following Thursday, that's the 17th, the following Thursday, which I think is the 24th, I will be back. And in that one, we're going to talk about advanced flash techniques. We're going to talk about high-speed sync, rear curtain sync, shutter drags. We're going to do something funkier with the LED lights that I kind of hinted at today, and then I couldn't figure it out yet because I didn't have the app, but I will do it next time. So if you haven't already, please do like the video. If at the beginning you were like, I don't know if I want to like this yet. Hopefully if you stuck around this long, you liked it. So like the video, subscribe to the channel. There's all kinds of new stuff coming out with Adorama all the time, so stay with us. I'm Daniel Norton. You can find me all over the place on social and whatnot. This is Cadence Frank. You can find her also all over the place on social and whatnot. And we'll talk to you soon. Now, pretend like we shut down right then, because I have to put the logo up. All right, we're doing it. We're putting the logo up. All right, there's one that says thanks. Here it is. There it is.